Hello and welcome to Oh and That's a Bad Miss, Hangover Edition. May have overindulged in the Christmas festivities last night, so let's get this underway as soon as possible. As ever, this is brought to you by reddit.com/r/snooker, the perfect place to come and discuss all things snooker. And as part of this episode, I'm going to be going through one of the threads which got quite interesting this week, shall we say. So head over to reddit.com/r/snooker. When I left you guys last week, it was the final of the Scottish Open, and in the end, Mark Allen was successful, defeating Shaun Murphy 9-7 in what actually ended up being a really good game. And despite Mark Allen standing by the fact that apparently he wasn't on great form, in a period of a week, he went from the UK Championship final to winning the Scottish Open. So, I mean, if you're not playing well, I'd hate to see him playing well. Shaun Murphy went from falling from grace this season and being knocked out in multiple first rounds to making it all the way to the final. And he continued that form this week in the German Masters Qualifying. I believe it was 7 centuries in 2 best of 11 matches. I think. Best of 9 matches. So he won 10 frames, 7 of which were centuries against Jimmy White and Martin O'Donnell. So not easy opponents either. So he's definitely found his form this season, Murphy, and I'll be interested to see where this leads, because as I've said in the past, he is by far one of my favourite players. And yeah, it's a difficult one with him, because he seems to come in these waves of playing incredibly and having his long potting can be brilliant, his break building and everything about his game just is incredible. But when it goes wrong, boy does it go wrong. So we'll see with the Champions League coming up and then the Masters exactly where he is with his game after the Christmas break, because that tends to knock a few players. But hopefully Murphy can continue with his success. Speaking of the German Masters qualifying, no real shocks. Mark Williams went through relatively easily. Judd Trump went through unbelievably easily, playing some incredible snooker, including the 146th competitive 147. So we are 147 away from the 147th 147. Oh, that's a lot of numbers. So yeah, that could come either at the Champions League, where they had a couple of 147s last year, or the Masters, and I think we all know where we'd rather it happen. In the historic Alexandra Palace, in front of all those spectators, that would be incredible to have such a historical moment. Something that it's only ever going to happen once. The 147th maximum break is only ever going to happen once. So yeah, what do you guys think? When do you expect it to happen? It's like predicting when O'Sullivan's going to hit his 1000th century. You sort of hope it's going to be in the biggest moment possible. But in reality, it does tend to happen where it sort of happens in the smaller tournaments. So for some reason, I'm sort of expecting it to happen in the Champions League, which not many people watch. Speaking of Shaun Murphy, a minute ago, on the latest episode of Bays Watch, which if you haven't checked, definitely watch it. It's on the World Snooker YouTube channel, and it's around a half-hour monthly video series where they go through all the news, and because it's World Snooker official, they've got all the great interviews. Rob Walker was interviewed this month, and Shaun Murphy went up to Leamington Spa. No one goes to Leamington Spa unless there's a really good reason, and there was, to see the offices of Snooker 19, the upcoming snooker game for, PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch, if I'm not mistaken. And, they've been quite secretive as to what modes they're going to include other than career and quick play, and whether they've done it on purpose or whether World Snooker have sort of let the cat out of the bag a little bit If you were to watch the video and want to see the screenshot I'm talking about, if you skip to 9 minutes and 43 seconds into episode 9 of Bay's Watch, you can see the home screen, and under the play tab, there's an online mode. Thank God. We've been waiting years for a snooker game with online. We've been waiting, by the time this comes out, it'll be 8 years since the last snooker game was released. And to have one with competitive online play, oh God, that's going to be so good. The only issue being, I might never leave my house again. Because there's something about playing the snooker games which really just wraps me up. And I used to be a huge gamer. I've fallen out of touch with it recently. I think it's since I've been sort of going to the pub more and doing real life stuff, you sort of realise video games are more of a distraction. But the snooker games are spectacular. And an online mode, a career mode, which they have confirmed includes every event. So even the little ones. So that's going to be really fun to play out. Culminating obviously with the Crucible, which looks gorgeous in game. Because obviously with a snooker game it's not a huge open world, is it? You're only in the Crucible, which is notoriously small. So the detail on the table in the arena already, even though they're still, in my estimation, is probably 9-10 months away from release, it's still beautiful. And there's so much more development time. And you can tell when they show footage of Sean Murphy playing the game, and you can tell the animation is a little bit clunky, but it's still not complete. And obviously the animation on a player model has no real impact on the game other than aesthetically. So that will be one of the last things they tackle. Which I saw a lot of people in the comments saying, oh, it looks clunky, looks like an old game, looks like previous generations games. But no, it will improve as the development of the game goes on. Hopefully after this next thing we can bury the hatchet on the bloody match fixing. But Bet365 has enacted a policy recently where they refuse to have any other markets on a match other than a win involving Chinese players. And this sport relies on bookies to an insane degree. The amount of money that comes in from the bookies is huge. And to have Bet365, one of the biggest ones in the country, and probably the world, not fully support a large portion of the sport is not good news for us. It's not good news for snooker fans. Whether you like the involvement of gambling at all, it funds a lot of these big tournaments realistically, and it's the reason it's on the telly as often as it is. And it's a dirty thing, gambling, really, when it's almost got a taboo around it, but it's necessary for snooker's survival. So yeah, I hope it's the last thing we hear about the match fixing, but for some reason I don't think it will be, especially with, is it Jamie Jones, I believe, is still on suspension and hasn't fully come to the forefront of what's happened. Yeah, I feel like this will be an ongoing one into 2019, which is a shame because it does put a bit of a black mark on this year. Even though this year has been spectacular in snooker, which I won't go into in detail because that will be my next week's episode, because we're in a bit of a drought when it comes to actual matches to talk about. So next week I'll be covering the ups, the downs, the everything about 2018 in snooker. Now, as I alluded to in the intro, there was a thread put up on r/snooker, which was, what is the most controversial snooker opinion you stand by? And obviously that got a lot of people talking, 116 comments in 6 days. It's got a lot of people quite passionate. So I thought I'd pick some of the best ones and give my 2 cents, because that's what a podcast is for. And if you're listening to this expecting anything other than me to talk about my opinions about snooker, I don't know what you're doing here. So, first one, which has 53 upvotes, so quite a popular opinion, from Mabel Witt is Judd Trump is the most overrated player of all time. Okay, this is difficult because Judd Trump, definitely talented. Hugely talented. He couldn't be in the position he's in if he wasn't. He's still relatively young. He's past the point where he's the young one now, and he's definitely not one of the youngest on the tour, but he's still got plenty of time in the sport. But by his age, the best had already won their world titles. The best had already flourished. The best of all time were already 5 steps up the ladder from where Judd Trump is. It's difficult because the pressure always gets to him. It always seems like when he's in his matches where he knows he can win and he's playing well, he'll destroy it and easily brush aside any opponent. But as soon as there's a hurdle in front of him, as soon as there's one misstep, he crumbles. And he's still got that thing that O'Sullivan had for most of his career, where I can only describe it as being stroppy. And quite often, you'll see Judd Trump's shoulders drop, sort of slouching around in his chair if he's not at the table, angry looking face. The body language says it all. He's unhappy, and his play is affected. And that's where he falters, because the best in the world don't let those little missteps get them down. The best in the world stand up, brush themselves off, and continue to try and win the match. But it is definitely a pressure thing, because he's really good in like the mid-tier tournaments. He always seems to do well. But in the big TV ones, especially the BBC ones, he falters time after time, earlier than he should do. I'm not sure if I agree that he's the most overrated player of all time, but he isn't as good as he should be. He hasn't had the results he should have from the natural talent he has. Because, my God, if you look at some of that naughty snooker he plays once he's won a frame, that boy has got some fucking talent. Now, the next one is another controversial one from the user Too Generic. And it's the 3 misses with full ball red in view rule should not involve the loss of the frame as a penalty. Rather, a free ball anywhere on the table, like in 6 reds. So for those of you who don't know, when a player has got full view, so can see both the extreme left and the extreme right of at least 1 red, and he misses, so foul and a miss, if he does that 3 times in a row, while having the full ball view of a red or a ball that's on, so if he's on a colour, although I don't think that's ever happened, then he concedes the frame. He loses. This does happen. I believe it happened, was it Poomjang, I think, who lost one in the World Championships, lost a frame because of it. And it's happened to a few people, and this user is suggesting that it should be a free ball anywhere on the table, like in 6 reds. Now, losing a frame is a severe punishment, especially if you look at the matches which are best of 7s or best of 5s. Like, if you lose a frame, that's a huge deal. But having full view of a red and missing 3 times, you get 2 chances to play like a fancy shot if you want. And if you miss that, then the 3rd attempt, you just hit the ball. As long as you hit it, you don't miss. You don't lose the frame. You're fine. So I personally think it's the correct way of doing it. Not only does it add a bit of fun, a bit of tension to when it happens, when that referee leans over and goes, due to you having full vision of the ball, if you miss, you concede the frame. Everyone snaps on. Everyone's locked in. Just that next shot has got so much riding on it. You can't help but just sort of think, what if he misses? He very rarely does. But what if he does? And that's entertainment. That's what snooker needs. That's what snooker's aiming for with the increased shot clock. Not shot clock, increased attention on shot times and everything like that. Snooker's aiming to be more entertaining, and this just adds more entertainment. So I think I'd have to disagree, but that's why it's a controversial opinion. Not everyone's going to agree. Now, the next one from a puffin is regarding Barry Hawkins and how a lot of people see him as a tournament favourite at a certain point. Like, every time he seems to reach quite far in the crucible, which makes you think, oh, Barry Hawkins, great player, top 16 all the time, one of the best in the world. But he's only won 3 ranking events in a 22-year career. Ryan Day has won 2 in the last year. Like, sorry, I'm repeating myself a bit there. Mark Allen won 2 this season. It's not impressive. The amount of talent Barry Hawkins has when he's on form, and you see it in the Crucible quite often during the Worlds, where he'll reach to the semi-finals or quarterfinals and play very impressively. And he just can't consistently do that. And someone else pointed out quite well that if you look at the compilations on YouTube of odd, stupid shots or mistakes, a lot of them do seem to be Barry Hawkins. It seems that he loses his concentration a bit, like when he hits a certain point in a match. So, yeah, I do have to agree that I don't rate Barry Hawkins as highly as a lot of people do, because it's as simple as 3 ranking events in a 22-year career. That's huge. That's a huge disappointment. The next topic is regarding the best of 7 matches and how Rob92 believes that they are simply not long enough. And I think a lot of people agree with that, because a best of 7, that's first to 4. You think about it like I was mentioning earlier with the 3 misses and you lose a frame. That's a quarter of the match gone. That's a quarter of your tally gone. Like for a game as methodical and where so like a fluke can change the outcome of a match, it's a best of 7 isn't really long enough. But when it comes to, again, it's down to entertainment and scheduling. A lot of players just don't have the time to be playing best of 9s, best of 12s, best of 13s, whatever. Best of 17s in the first round of the UK Championships like it used to be. There's not enough time in a day, especially with the amount of tournaments we got on the circuit these days, and people are already complaining about exhaustion. Imagine having to play best of 17s all the way up to the final of the UK Championship, and then having to go to the Scottish Open, and if that was like best of 9s or best of anything, 15s, it's difficult. It's one of those ones where you have to. It's a balancing act, like a lot of things. You've got to try and find that middle ground, and I think we're slightly overly leaning towards the short matches now, and it seems to be getting worse. But I don't see it getting any better in the future. Lastly, this will be the last one I've covered. This will be the 5th one. Is McLaren Mercedes saying that John Higgins is one of the most underrated snooker players of all time. And bringing up his match fixing, which is what I was going to do anyway. John Higgins, undoubtedly, one of the top 5 greatest. I mixed up best and greatest there and said baitist. Not a word. You can tell the hangover is starting to take effect. John Higgins is one of the greatest players of all time, no doubt. He is incredibly talented. Is one of the few players who can give Ronnie consistently a run for his money. But a lot of people don't sort of think of him in the same calibre as O'Sullivan, Hendry, Davis, Ray Reardon, all of those. And I think a lot of it does have to do with his match-fixing allegations. For those not aware, a few years ago, John Higgins was filmed by an undercover reporter for a newspaper. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was The Sun, maybe, one of those rumour mills, bollocks newspapers. He was brought into, I think it was News of the World, which is now defunct. Good job, memory. he was taken into a room by someone posing as someone who would help fix matches. And Higgins accepted the offer to throw frames in order for financial gain, substantial financial gain. It never happened, never went through because it was never a real offer. It was a sting. And Higgins got away lightly. I think he was banned for around a year due to his argument was that he had been rushed into the meeting and felt threatened and thought, oh, I'll just have to agree. If you watch the video, that's not a man who's scared. That's not a man who's worried for his life, like he claimed. That's not a man who's struggling. He seems quite happy to be drinking champagne with them, doing a business meeting. And I know a lot of people are a lot more venomous about him. There's a well-known sort of snooker Twitter personality, Snooker Backer, who also does a bit of journalism on his website, who has said some quite honestly despicable things about John Higgins in the past. I'll never be that vicious about it. I do believe he should have been punished more thoroughly. I do believe it should always be brought up, because in a sport that's already struggling with its match fixing allegations, we shouldn't give anyone a free pass. No one, no matter how good, should be able to do what John Higgins did and not walk away scot-free, but walk away with a clear conscience, really. In the same way, I think Stuart Bingham should have been banned for longer. And I do believe that Stephen Lee and, what was his name? Not Chow Yu Peng, the other lad who got banned a couple of weeks ago, I believe they should be banned for life. I'll always take the slightly stronger way of defending, of punishing match fixers. But that's just my personal opinion on it, and that's what this is all about. You guys, as ever, in the comments, on Reddit, on YouTube, on Twitter, at and that's a bad one. Feel free to send me your opinions on any of these. That's what I'm after, is the back and forth. And while I'm here talking about this, thank you guys, because this has gone down really well. Obviously, you guys can't see the statistics that I can, but thank you guys, because I took a bit of a punt in the dark doing this one, and I wasn't sure if people wanted a snooker podcast, because not many people. It's almost like a disconnect between the sort of person who listens to podcasts and the sort of person who watches snooker. But apparently there is no disconnect. So yeah, thank you for the support. And I've had a few people ask me how they can help out with the podcast. No donations or anything. No, nothing silly like that. Just tell your mates. Just share it on Twitter. Retweet. Give me a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to it. Subscribe on YouTube. All of these things do help growth. It is doing me a favour when you do that, and for half an hour, 25 minutes content each week, I'd really appreciate it. But either way, even if you can't, I just appreciate you guys listening and contributing to the discussion. It's become a highlight of my Sundays, recording these and reading through everything through the week and getting the support. It's a nice little community I feel we're building. And enough of the soppy bollocks. I think that about sums up this week. Yeah, good little week of snooker I think we've had. And a good year. And next week I'll be going through the highs and the lows of 2018. But until then, have an absolutely belting Christmas. And I'll see you next week.